My next guest is as Aussie as they come. He loves his footy, he's a cricket tragic, and he's good at taking the piss. He does get some interesting mail, though. Biggest loser on the planet, skanky Westie, and kamikaze Nazi are just some of the things people call him. And that's nothing compared to what they call his wife. Please welcome journalist, lawyer, and one of the hosts of SBS's Salam Cafe, Waleed Aly. Welcome. Now, I know you're not well. We have sustenance here for you. If you need to cough at any point, I'm going to ask you just to hold it in for the entire interview and just really... Just so we can... We've got a camera close-up on you. We just want to watch your face contorting with the effort.
OK.
We're actually going to start with a piece of footage, because I know that you are a major Richmond Tigers fan, and I just want you to look at this, and when it's over, tell me which one in this shot are you.
OK.
OK, where are you in that shot?
Right. I know what you're getting at. The truth is I'm actually not in that shot. But you're getting at the fact that I have been known to dress up as the Richmond mascot.
Yes.
In the tiger suit.
Yeah. And
go around the audience basically kissing babies.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I wasn't that particular mascot.
But you could have said you were. No one would have known.
Would you like to do that again?
No, that's fine. No, we'll actually just cut that in later ourselves.
OK. Yeah. Yeah, no, I was back in 2001. A friend of mine had the contract to be the Richmond mascot.
Ooh.
He had the gig normally, but his brother was getting married, so he couldn't go to a marriage. So he calls me up and says, his name's Jeff. He said, well, I've got to go to this wedding. I need you to fill in for me. And I was like, well, OK, this is the greatest opportunity of my life to wear the tiger mascot. It's unreal.
Because the tigers mean all to you.
Everything.
Yeah,
I mean, there is nothing without the tigers. So I said, OK. He gave me his instructions. You walk out there, you kiss a few kids, you sign some autographs. Sign some autographs. Apparently tigers sign autographs. And
what do they write? Rawr.
Yeah, pretty much. Paw print.
Yeah.
And he basically said to me, whatever you do, just make sure that you don't do anything stupid. So I went out there. I said, OK, fine. Went out there. I was in the tiger mascot. It was round 2, 2001. Richmond were playing the Bulldogs. He gave me one warning. He said, the Bulldog likes a bit of biffo. Now, the Bulldog, at this time, had one of these enormous suits, huge muscles, really horrible growl on his face, fangs, everything. And he was looking at me, doing this. And at that point in my life, I sort of forgot there's a human inside it. And I bought into the aggressive look. And I thought, I'm in a bit of trouble here. But I can't let everyone know. There's 40,000 people out there. I've got to put up a tigerish fight. So I did. And I go out there and we're wrestling. And it hits me about 3 seconds into this that there's a reason he likes a bit of biffo. And it's because he's really good at it. So he is killing me. I am just destroyed. And eventually, after he slammed me about 3 times, I thought, I've got to come up with something, because the Richmond crowd is going to be distraught with the fact that I'm letting the whole club down. This is a proud club. And I thought, what I'll do is next time he comes at me, I'll duck, I'll go between his legs, which is, it's a very manly way to fight, really, and grab him and try to slam him.
Yeah. And
I did. I went between his legs and I grabbed and I pulled as hard as I possibly could. And then I heard this roar. And I thought, all right. But then I realised, looking through the mouth, that I'd ripped his head off.
Lots of upset kiddies there that day.
Well, you see, you have to understand, because when I was going around the ground, I could hear kids debating with each other whether or not I was a real tiger or a person in a suit. So there's a lot of kids right on the edge of fantasy and reality at that point. And I had completely destroyed this for them. And there's this guy in this huge bulldog suit with this little pea head on the top of it. And he was angry.
Yeah.
And then later on in that game was one of the all-time great brawls between Richmond and the Bulldogs.
Yes.
Which resulted in a player being suspended for 8 weeks and blood noses and all sorts of things. And I like to take credit for setting the mood for those eventual hostilities. I think without my contribution, that might not have happened.
I think that is absolutely wrong. But we'll go with it.
Yeah.
Your mum and dad were both Egyptian. As a kid growing up, what tales did you hear of Egypt?
Actually, not that many. It's interesting. My parents were odd in that way, in that they didn't try to infuse in me love of the home country. And I remember having a conversation with my dad, especially, that he was keen for me not to be with the Egyptian community really tightly, so that I wasn't going to all the Saturday schools and all these sorts of things. And I played footy, I didn't play soccer, and I played cricket, and they'd never heard of cricket. And, I think Dad was actually very keen to make sure that I wasn't going to be an outcast in Australia. So Egypt wasn't really a major part of my upbringing, which is kind of odd.
Well, because you went there as an adult
Yes.
when you were 20. What was your experience of Egypt?
I experienced major culture shock. In that first week, I remember thinking, I just want to go home. I just found the place run down and dirty and crowded and inhospitable and so on. And then something flipped. As soon as I spent that week there, I suddenly fell in love with the place. There's an energy about it. There is no place like it on earth. It's a modern city with donkeys in the middle of traffic. It's like the 10th century with cars. It's phenomenal, and it's incredibly crowded. And but amidst this chaos is this kind of serenity. It was at that moment really that I kind of arrived at a new level of religious consciousness in a way, because as a Muslim growing up in Australia, your religious identity is not it's something you can avoid if you want to. And there were parts of my life where I had.
I want to move through your religious journey. When you came back from Egypt and you were studying law and chemical engineering at Melbourne Uni, you got involved with what you refer to now as a fundamentalist group, a fundamentalist way of thinking. How would you define that?
Fundamentalism?
Well, the group you were involved with.
Oh, it wasn't so much a group, it was more me.
It was a group of one.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
right. Yeah, the rightly guided group. I think, when I think about fundamentalism, it's a term I hate because it's so misused. So when I use it, I try to define it. And what I mean by that is a belief in the inerrancy of your own self. I came back to Australia looking for religious things. And when I looked around, all I saw really, all that was really being offered was a brand of Islam that I think really did inculcate a kind of fundamentalist outlook, a kind of thing that was about purity to the exclusion of everyone else who is by definition then impure. And it's at that phase that I sort of started doing all the things that people who follow a similar kind of path do. And I think it's actually a kind of form of youth rebellion in a lot of cases.
What kind of things?
Well, like, for example, the first thing you do is you find your parents and you tell them off about everything they've ever done in their life. That's the first stage. There's, people are recognising this. And I actually think that's partly what drives a lot of this in Muslim Australia, because a lot of our parents, they were from sort of post-colonial societies where religion was part of their culture, but that's what it was. And then their kids were the ones who kind of, instead of taking drugs to rebel, they became religious. It's probably not the most aggressive way of rebelling, but it's
well, no, but it actually can be, because
well,
it's just as drugs are, it's a denial of a certain way of life to go into any mindset which excludes your parents or excludes others.
But what it does is it allows you to take a moral high ground with respect to your parents, so you can start lecturing them, which as a kid feels fantastic. I mean, the opportunity to do that and to explain why everything they've ever done is wrong.
Can I just say,
priceless.
Connor, if you're watching this right now, this man is an ignorant.
Well, I did get past it.
Yes.
So maybe I'm a role model.
I just want to go back to the fundamentalist thing, because a lot of people have stayed with that journey. And as we know, in various parts of the world, that has led to a very aggressive expression of fundamentalism. Within the people you were talking with, was there a debate about the best way to spread the word? Was it about preaching or was it about action?
I have to be clear, I was never in anything that was remotely violent. For us, it was all about preaching, but it wasn't... It's funny, we didn't seem to think that people would need to like us. We just kind of figured that we could go out there and yell at people and then they'd suddenly see the light and think, wow, you guys are great. Like if we insulted them enough, they'd eventually grow to love us or something. There was a heightened political consciousness, though, of the plight of Muslims overseas. So there was constant reference to that. I mean, and whether it be the Palestinians or the Chechens or even southern Philippines, southern Thailand, these were constantly part of your identity. And what it helped you do was construct for yourself a kind of globalised identity.
So why didn't it ultimately speak to you?
Actually, I think it doesn't speak to most people in the end. There's a trend. I got a friend who's been doing some social research. He's doing his PhD, and he was in the UK. And he's spoken to a lot of people who went through even more radical phases than me. And he said there's an interesting phenomenon at work. They go to university, they get into these sort of groups and this sort of worldview, and then they get jobs and they get married and they have kids, and they look around and they say, this doesn't work. This is just a bit stupid, really. And they kind of grow out of it. And I think for a lot of people that's what ends up happening.
I want to speak to you a bit later about complexity and what it is about Islam that you love. But I'd like to welcome your wife, Susan. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you.
Now,
there's some complexity, right?
Ooh, we're away. I'll just sit back, you two go for it. Now, you've had an interesting journey to Islam. Let's go back to when you were 17, when you decided to do a bit of a comparison shop of religions. What was driving that?
I think had been very involved in my church up until that point.
Which was?
At that stage, it was the Baptist Church. I'd also been in the Uniting Church when I was younger.
What was your view of Islam at that time?
Really negative. Really, really, really negative. I thought it was, barbaric, sexist, outdated. All I'd really seen about Islam was Not Without My Daughter. So that's an interesting representation.
Got a reaction?
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Even when I decided to take a break from church and look at other faiths, I didn't want to know about Islam. As far as I was concerned, the door was shut on that. So I just started looking around, but despite myself, I found that I just kept coming across information about Islam and that sort of thing. And I realised that when I sort of tried to strip past all the standard sort of pop culture stuff about Islam out there, 60 Minutes and that sort of stuff, but also, Cosmo would do spreads on Islam and stuff like that.
What sort of spreads did Cosmo do on Islam?
Well, well, yeah, no, they weren't the sealed section spreads, but,
The veiled section.
Yeah. So, yeah, when I tried to look past that, but also past sort of the propaganda sort of stuff that Muslims were putting out there and try to, as much as you can as a human being, strip past that and get back to what the religion was saying about itself. I actually, surprisingly for myself, I found it, it made a lot of sense.
Let me guess, you said that you started getting information wherever you looked. Was a key moment when you were at the football and a tiger mascot went, read the Quran?
Yeah, and I thought, wow, this religion's really got something.
It's everywhere. How did you come to meet and fall in love with Waleed?
My boyfriend at church was Waleed's best friend. Yeah. Hasn't that turned out badly? So I knew about Waleed in that way, and just, my boyfriend would tell me about his best friend. I remember thinking, well, we'll just have to make him Christian.
You must have had some pretty good conversations.
Well, surprisingly not. Whenever I asked Waleed about Islam, especially because, I'd started to get interested, and I'd say, I read this. What does that mean? Waleed was so reluctant to talk about Islam at all. I think he was so worried that when I was actually asking to attack, that it was like the shutters came up and he just did not want to talk about it.
So what was the moment where it crossed over from being a friendship and somebody who you thought was interesting to that guy's special?
Well, I suppose I always thought Waleed was a bit of a dish, but it wasn't. It was actually after I became Muslim, people started saying, you and Waleed would be really great together. He's you're really well matched, and he's such a good guy, and I just wasn't interested at all. I'm sure Waleed would like to tell a very humiliating story about this. No. Waleed loves to tell this story.
In fact, I'd like Susan to tell it. Because...
No, you, by all means.
Basically, she delivered that classic line, because I was quite interested in marrying her when people started suggesting this. You need to understand that the minute you become a Muslim, there are 3 million people out there trying to get you married. This is the way it works.
Okay.
And so Susan ran into this, and I kind of thought, yeah, that's a good idea, and let Susan know that, and she let me know in no uncertain terms it wasn't a good idea. And so she develops this classic line where she actually literally said to me, I would not marry you if you were the last man on earth. And it was at that point I thought, I'm in here. No, actually, at that point...
hard to get.
Yeah, that's right. No, but at that point I thought, oh, well, I'll take that as a fairly blunt message. Mm. And I thought, OK, well, see you later then. I'll just go do my own thing. And then she realised precisely what she was missing out on. And feel free to correct me at any point.
I did notice you shaking your head there, Susan. How do you... Can we see it from your angle?
Well, actually, he's pretty much got it on the money. That is how it was. I did say to him, like, because he rang me, all these people were saying, get together, and I was like, I don't know. And then he rang me and sort of put the offer, I think we'd be really good together. And I just said, listen, I wouldn't marry if you were the last man on earth. That's the end of it. And so Waleed said, oh, okay, and moved on. And then, like Waleed said afterwards, after that, and a bit of time went past, I actually realised. I think, and also things had sort of calmed down a bit with, after I became Muslim, and things were better with my family and friends. And I actually realised, well, yeah, he actually is, he's a pretty good guy. And then I had to humiliate myself and go crawling back and say, actually, I think I really like you.
Would a marriage have been likely or possible if Susan wasn't Islamic?
Probably not likely. Possible.
Why not likely?
Well, I think there's this thing. It all works fine and it all makes sense till you get to kids. And then it starts to get tricky. And if you haven't, like an interfaith marriage, particularly if both parties to that marriage, I sound like a lawyer, parties to that marriage. If both people feel quite strongly about their religious convictions, then once children come along, there's a lot of fights there waiting to happen, I think.
Can't you have a dual spiritual passport?
You can try. You can try.
And travel between different metaphysical planes?
Only a select few can do that.
Yes, I guess so.
Yeah.
I'm going to raise some of the common objections to Islam very shortly, but I want to show one way that you've both chosen to communicate about your religion is through the show on SBS Salam Cafe, which is an unexpected take on your religion because it's done with humour. Here's an excerpt. Hey! What's been the reaction from within the Muslim communities at Salam Cafe?
Overwhelmingly, it's been positive. It's quite amazing the number of Muslims that's brought out of the woodwork, especially Muslim jokers, people who always thought they were a bit funny.
Yeah. And
give us lots of suggestions for sketches.
Are they actually funny?
No. No. But they say things like, that sketch you did in that last episode, that was terrible. Here's one I've written. Feel free to use it. Like, well, thank you.
Because I've always, what I've understood of the Islamic community is that the older generation have a great sway over the conversation within the community and are very conservative about how the discussion is held.
That's why this show is interesting, and the responses that it generates from Muslims are interesting, because we get responses from young, ordinary, everyday Muslims who suddenly feel empowered and proud of something that's on TV. Now, I can't vouch for their taste in television, but what they feel proud of is the fact that they see something on TV that kind of reflects who they are, when everywhere else they look, there isn't that. And so it's given them a lot of pride, which I didn't really expect at all. Then you get probably about 5% of our email from Muslims is really, really angry stuff, telling us that the sooner we go to hell, literally, the better.
I got you to send me some of the hate mail that you've got. This is, I assume, not from within the Islamic community.
No, I don't think so.
I just wanted to read a couple of things. Funny how a splash with water and banging your heads on the floor 6 times a day turns you into a kamikaze Nazis thinking you're going to rule the world. And then Lucky Carlin demonstrated her lack of skill at self-protection, as every Muslim girl should do, as being pushed into the back of a souped-up Commodore and gang raped by a bunch of ugly Muslims must be the main priority of every good Muslim girl's must-dos. Yes, you can laugh that off, and I suppose that's appropriate to do, but there's a depth of stereotype and anger there which I would find disturbing if I were you.
Yeah,
How do you deal with that?
It is. I mean, that's an especially awful one. When you get an email like that, you have a choice about how to react, and you have to try to take the higher moral ground and just brush it off. Otherwise, you can go crazy.
I want to read one other, Waleed, which is...
Please do.
Do you really expect people to believe that your stacked panel, i.e. a lawyer, a doctor, etc., is a clear representation of the Muslim community within Australia? Where was the non-English speaking 60-year-old, the street thug, the religious fanatic, etc.?
Well, they're on the news every night.
And is that the point? That
kind of. I mean, it's not like they're underrepresented. What they're struggling with is the fact that perhaps it's a little too representative, that it doesn't conform with every prejudice that they've brought to the program and to that email. It rattles their world, and they can't cope with it. And so the way they cope with it is by firing off angry emails. And that's why that stuff's funny. Because you kind of start to realise, well, there's some seriously funny, weird stuff going on in their heads.
What has Al-Qaeda done to Islam?
To Islam, probably nothing. I think in the long run, organisations like Al-Qaeda don't have a long-term impact because they don't stand for much. And people will eventually find that out. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who is an expert in Middle East politics and radicalisation in the Middle East, and he made the point. He said, if Al-Qaeda had a slogan, it would basically be, we blow stuff up. That's pretty much it. And once you get beyond that, once you've blown stuff up, what happens?
I know that you find it quite tiresome talking about the hijab and all of that. Why is that?
Imagine if pretty much every day someone said to you, so Andrew, a lot of people find that shirt oppressive. Tell me, what does that shirt mean to you? Does it take you to another spiritual plane? Does your wife make you dress like that? Imagine if every day you were just defending it and having to explain. It does get tiresome.
Maybe you need a bumper sticker which says, my other religion is Catholic.
Yeah. Well, I think, you do have to make fun with it, otherwise you just want to start killing people. Just kidding, ASIO. No, just kidding.
I'm seeing a great promo here. Muslim rage.
Exactly.
Just want to start killing people.
No, but yeah.
That's all we need. That's fine. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah.
I mean, I should say, I don't want to make this a whinge fest, because really what I've been through is nothing compared to what Susan's been through, and what she's been through is nothing compared to a lot of other Muslims have been through, where it's actually got violent, and also what a lot of non-Muslims have been through at the hands of Muslims far outweighs anything that we've been through.
You don't think this is a clash of civilizations? You think it's a clash of ignorance? I think you've been describing some of the ignorance that exists from the non-Muslim community towards you. What is the ignorance within your community?
Oh, look, Muslims do the same thing to the Western world that they don't like the Western world doing to them. The same sort of stereotyping. You learn about Western cultures by watching Hollywood films, and you look around you and see a Starbucks or a McDonald's on every corner and so on. And then you construct for yourself this view of the West, which is completely artificial because it doesn't allow in any of the fullness and the richness of Western societies or human societies generally. And so it's this tragic situation where you've got Muslims legitimately complaining about being stereotyped, all the while stereotyping back with just as much persistence.
I'm going to show you a little bit of footage of somebody that I guess fulfills a stereotype. This is after the decision not to build the Islamic school in Camden. This is Kate. Hey! Can logic speak to prejudice?
It depends on the brand of prejudice.
Well, that brand, for instance.
No. You're not going to dismantle that through logic. There's a famous saying, you can't reason a person out of a position they didn't arrive at through reason. And I think that's a good example of that. There's an emotional rage to that.
I want to bring the conversation back around to where we started, which is football. And last year, I think the first Muslim AFL player debuted in the top grade, Bakar Houli for Essendon. This is his first ever goal. Now, you wrote about that game and that moment in The Age. What did that moment mean to you?
Actually, I was amazed how much it meant to me. I should make clear, he's not actually the first Muslim ever to have played, but he's the first practising, openly devout Muslim to have played in the AFL. There are two playing at the moment. One plays for the Bombers, the other plays for the Demons. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what you do with that.
Yeah.
But
I think the Townsville Jihad are entering a team next year too.
That's right, looking for a team on the Gold Coast.
Yeah, there we go.
But I remember watching that, and it comes back to this idea that as human beings, I think we like to see reflections of ourselves in the public space. And Muslims have been really short on role models in the public space in Australia, or even in the Western world. We've had some very successful Muslims. John Ilhan, the late John Ilhan, is a very good example of that. But at the same time, his real name was Mustafa, and he had to become John. to become a success.
Crazy Mustafa would not have
Would
sold
not
much.
work.
No.
No. You're not going to buy a mobile phone from Crazy Mustafa.
No, you're not.
Because you don't know what the phone will do. But, you know, but someone like Bashar, and he's a great man as well. I mean, he's impressed everyone at the Essendon Football Club with his character, with the way he carries himself. And when you see him out there and you see him do that, you suddenly for a moment have this belief, this realisation that I could do that if I had the talent. But the thing that's stopping me is that I'm no good, not that I happen to be a Muslim or that I come from a Middle Eastern background. And that's incredibly powerful. It's so powerful. I don't think people who don't have that problem, who have never encountered not being represented in the public space in some way, understand how debilitating that can be.
You published a book last year, People Like Us, and the dedication was lovely. It's to your two children, a boy and a little girl, and you said, may your world fulfil its potential, not complete its trajectory.
Yes.
The difference being?
Well, I think where the world's headed right now, I don't find particularly inspiring or hopeful. And the book is kind of all about that. It's about why the world's stuffed, basically, at the moment. But we can turn that around. You know, I think it's possible for human beings, if they commit themselves to understanding each other, even if they don't like each other, but just actually understanding each other. You know, informed hatred is what I'm after, Andrew. No, but seriously,
it's a noble ambition.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's a Peace Prize kind of ambition.
Yes.
You know, if we can actually commit, really try to understand each other, then I think the trajectory will change.
Which is an excellent sentiment. Only a lot of people watching this tonight, all they're thinking is, that's the bastard that ripped off the bulldog's head.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But doesn't that prove I'm integrated?
You're a good Aussie. Waleed, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Andrew.
Pleasure. Thank you, Susan.